Homeless black twin boys returned a billionaire's lost wallet. What he discovered made him cry. "You two get out of here immediately." The security guard at the luxury mall pointed his flashlight directly at the boys' faces. "Kids like you have no business here." Marcus and Miguel, twins only 8 years old, instinctively backed away. But Marcus was clutching something to his chest, a black leather wallet he had found on the parking lot floor. Their torn coats and holey sneakers stood in stark contrast to the Italian marble and shiny storefronts around them. "But sir, we just want to return this," Marcus whispered, holding out the wallet with trembling hands. "There's a man's name inside." The security guard laughed dismissively. "Of course you do. Return it after you've taken everything of value, right?" He spoke into his radio, code 2 at the north entrance. 2 minors suspected. Alexander Rothschild watched the scene from the second floor, leaning on the marble balcony of his exclusive jewelry store. At 52, the billionaire had built an empire, but he had never witnessed anything that touched his soul as much as that seemingly simple scene. The boys didn't run away. Instead, Marcus put the wallet on the ground and walked away, pulling Miguel by the hand. "Let's go," he whispered. "We tried to do the right thing." That's when Alexander noticed something peculiar in the boy's eyes. There was no anger or rebellion, just a resignation that shouldn't exist in an 8-year-old, as if he were already accustomed to this kind of treatment. "Wait!" His voice echoed through the hall. Alexander hurried down the stairs, his $3,000 suit drawing immediate attention. "That wallet, it's mine." The security guard's demeanor changed completely. "Mr. Rothschild, I was just protecting your property. These kids obviously returned something that wasn't theirs," Alexander interrupted, taking the wallet and checking its contents. Everything was there, credit cards, documents, and over $2,000 in cash. But it was what he found folded between the bills that made his world stop. A piece of notebook paper with childish handwriting. "We found this on the ground. My grandma always said that returning lost things brings good luck. We hope you're not worried, Marcus and Miguel." Alexander looked at the boys, who were nervously watching his reaction. "Did you write this?" Marcus nodded shyly. "We didn't know your phone number, so we left the note for you to know that we didn't take anything." Something broke inside Alexander's chest. In 52 years of life, surrounded by lawyers, executives, and people who crawled for crumbs of his fortune, 2 children abandoned on the streets had shown more integrity than any adult in his social circle. "Where do you live?" he asked softly. Miguel, who had been silent until then, whispered on the bridge near the river. "But it's not bad, sir. We get by." The security guard cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Mr. Rothschild, if I may, these boys are known around here. They always show up asking for food at restaurants. Maybe it would be better to call social services." Alexander turned to the man with a look that made his blood run cold. "Perhaps you should worry about your own job and leave those with character alone." He knelt in front of the twins for the first time in decades, not caring that his $1,000 suit touched the cold floor. "You gave me something much more valuable than a wallet today. You taught me a lesson." Marcus frowned, confused. "What lesson, sir?" "That true wealth has nothing to do with money." Alexander smiled, a tear rolling down his cheek. "And that 2 8-year-old boys just taught me something that 52 years of life couldn't." At that moment, observing the dignity of these children who had so little but offered so much, Alexander made a decision that would not only change their lives, but reveal secrets about his own family that had been buried for decades. If this story of unexpected compassion touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what Alexander discovered about these boys' past would make anyone rethink the true meaning of family and destiny. 3 hours after that encounter at the mall, Alexander couldn't get the boys out of his head. Sitting in his marble and crystal office on the 47th floor overlooking the entire city, he held the crumpled note between his fingers for the 10th time. "We found this on the floor. My grandma always said that returning lost things brings good luck." The word grandma intrigued him deeply. Where was this grandmother now? Why were 2 8-year-old children alone on the streets? His secretary, Patricia, knocked on the door. "Mr. Rothschild, I called social services as you requested. They said they know the boys, Marcus and Miguel Santos. They've been in the system for 6 months since their grandmother died." Alexander looked up sharply. "Died? How? Complicated diabetes?" "She was raising them alone in a rented apartment on the east side when she passed away. The landlord evicted them because there was no one to pay the rent." Patricia consulted her notes. "They've run away from temporary shelter 3 times. They say they want to stay together and that adults always lie." Something tightened in Alexander's chest. He knew that feeling of abandonment better than he'd care to admit. "There's more," Patricia continued hesitantly. "The social worker, Miss Morrison, said she's trying to separate them. Apparently, twin brothers are harder to place in foster families. So the protocol is to separate them. Alexander stood up abruptly, knocking papers off the table. They only have each other. Patricia blinked, surprised by the emotional reaction from her normally ice-cold boss. Sir, they're just department guidelines, Mrs. Morrison said it's what works best statistically. Alexander walked to the window, looking out at the city below. Somewhere in that maze of concrete and neglect, 2 8-year-old boys were sleeping rough because the system had failed them completely. Sir, Patricia hesitated. May I ask why you care so much? I mean, it's admirable. But Alexander turned, and for a moment, she saw something she had never seen before. Real vulnerability. When I was 9, Patricia. My parents died in a car accident. I was thrown into the same system that is failing Marcus and Miguel. The revelation hung in the air like a confession. Patricia had worked for Alexander for 8 years and had never known this part of his story. They separated me from my younger brother, David. Alexander continued, his voice almost a whisper. They said it was best for us. I never saw him again. I never knew if he was okay, if he was alive, if he needed me. Patricia swallowed hard. Mr. Rothschild, I didn't know. No one knows. I built this empire, accumulated all this wealth, but I never managed to find my brother. The system swallowed him up. Alexander clenched his fists. I won't let that happen to Marcus and Miguel. That afternoon, Alexander did something he had never done in his 30-year career. He canceled all his meetings and went out personally to look for the children. He drove to the bridge where Miguel had mentioned they slept, a gloomy spot under the iron structure where the sound of traffic echoed constantly. He found them huddled in a large cardboard box, sharing a sandwich that had clearly been rescued from the trash of some restaurant. When he saw him, Marcus instinctively placed himself in front of his brother like a little guardian. We didn't come here to do anything wrong, Marcus said quickly. We were just hungry. Alexander knelt on the dirty floor, not caring about his $3,000 suit. I know you didn't do anything wrong. In fact, I came to thank you again and to ask if you would like to have dinner with me. Miguel peeked out from behind his brother. A real dinner at a restaurant? Better than that, Alexander smiled. At my house, I have a huge kitchen, and I don't even know how to use it properly. Marcus frowned suspiciously. Why would a rich man like you want to have dinner with us? The question hit Alexander like a punch. That 8-year-old child had learned to distrust kindness because the world had failed her repeatedly. Because you reminded me of something important, Alexander replied honestly, of what it's like to be a good person, even when the world isn't good to you. That's when Miguel whispered something that made Alexander's heart stop. Our grandma said we had to be good because our parents were watching us from heaven. They died when we were babies. Alexander closed his eyes for a moment. Orphans, just like he had been, just like David. Your parents would have been proud of you today, he said softly. And I'm sure your grandmother would have been too. Marcus let his guard down a little. Do you have a family? Alexander hesitated. I had a brother once, but I lost him a long time ago. Like we lost our grandmother, similar. Alexander nodded. So I understand how you feel. That night, for the first time in decades, Alexander's house echoed with children's laughter. They ate pizza at the formal dining table, used the linen napkins to make paper airplanes, and Miguel fell asleep on the Italian leather sofa watching cartoons. When Marcus began to doze off as well, Alexander covered them with expensive blankets that probably cost more than many people earned in a month. Watching them sleep peacefully for the first time in months, he made a decision that would change all their lives. The next morning, his decision would face its first serious obstacle. Mrs. Morrison, a 50-year-old woman with thick glasses and a briefcase full of regulations, appeared at the door with 2 police officers. Mr. Rothschild, I need you to hand over the children immediately. Taking vulnerable minors without legal authorization is a serious crime. Alexander remained calm at the door, blocking her view into the house where Marcus and Miguel were still sleeping. The children are safe, fed, and cared for. What exactly is the problem? The problem, she growled, is that you don't have legal custody, and people like you always think money can buy whatever they want. There it was. The prejudice Alexander recognized perfectly well. To her, he was just another rich guy trying to play hero. People like me, Alexander repeated calmly. Billionaires who think the rules don't apply to them. These children need stability, not a temporary playground until you get tired of them. It was exactly the kind of bureaucratic arrogance that had destroyed his own childhood. The system that cared more about paperwork than the actual well-being of children. But Mrs. Morrison didn't know she was completely underestimating the person standing in front of her. Alexander Rothschild hadn't built a billion-dollar empire by being passive in the face of obstacles. I understand your concerns, he said calmly, but I can assure you that these children will have all the stability they deserve and all the legal resources they need. Sir, you don't understand how the system works. Actually, Alexander interrupted with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I understand exactly how it works, and I have some resources you may not have considered. What Mims? Morrison didn't know was that behind that apparent calm, Alexander was already formulating a plan that would not only save Marcus and Miguel, but expose the flaws of a corrupt system that separated brothers and treated children like numbers on spreadsheets. While she threatened with protocols and regulations, Alexander remained serene, like someone who holds powerful cards up his sleeve and knows exactly when to families. Separation is recommended to facilitate the process. Mrs. Morrison, what you call procedure. We call cruelty. The twins were neglected by the system, not by their family. Morrison's lips trembled. This is highly irregular. What do you want from me? Richard smiled thinly. Simple. An official acknowledgement that the children are under the legal guardianship of their uncle, Alexander Rothschild, effective immediately. Otherwise, we will file a federal lawsuit for violation of family preservation laws, negligence and emotional damage to minors. And trust me, after what the department did to the Thompson family, I doubt your superiors want another public scandal. Mrs. Morrison looked from Richard to Alexander. Realizing she had lost, her voice came out small. Fine. I'll prepare the paperwork, but this isn't over. Alexander's tone was calm, almost gentle. For you, maybe not. For them, it's just beginning. An hour later, the police cars and government vans were gone. The house was quiet again, except for the sound of Miguel laughing in the garden. Marcus ran to Alexander, holding a soccer ball. Uncle Alexander, can we play outside? The word uncle hit him straight in the heart. It was the first time he had heard it in over 30 years. He smiled. Of course you can, but be careful with the glass wall near the fountain. As he watched the boys playing under the morning sun, Alexander finally felt the peace he had been searching for since childhood. The past had come full circle. The little boy who once lost his brother to a broken system had now rescued his brother's children from the same fate. That night, Alexander placed a framed photo of David, Isabella, Marcus, and Miguel on his desk. Beneath it, he placed the note the boys had written when they found his wallet. My grandma always said, returning lost things brings good luck. He smiled, whispering to the photo. You were right, Grandma. It did. For the first time in decades, the billionaire didn't feel alone. He wasn't just a man with wealth and influence. He was an uncle, a protector, a family, and somewhere, he knew David was smiling too. How did you get access to internal documents? Morrison stammered. Ms. Morrison, Richard smiled coldly. When you threaten to separate the family of a man who controls $2.4 billion and has the best lawyers in the country, you should have been better prepared. That's when Alexander pulled out his phone. Marcus, Miguel, can you come down, please? The boys descended the marble stairs, wearing new but simple clothes. Their hair cut and their faces radiant. The transformation was undeniable. From abandoned children to clearly loved and cared for boys. Ms. Morrison, Marcus said calmly, Mr. Alexander is our real uncle. He showed us pictures of our father as a child. Miguel held his brother's hand, and he promised we'll never be separated. Morrison stared at the children as if she were seeing ghosts. Her arrogant confidence had turned into barely concealed panic. Furthermore, Richard continued, pulling out a tablet, I have here recordings of your 3 attempts to separate these children against their will, in direct violation of family preservation protocol. He pressed play. Morrison's voice echoed clearly. Twin brothers are problematic. It's better to separate them now while they're young. They'll get used to it. The police officers exchanged uncomfortable glances. This was no longer a simple search and seizure. There's more. Richard smiled. I got access to your reports from the last 5 years. 47 cases of sibling separation. 23 of them against psychological recommendation. Success rate in subsequent adoptions. 12% recidivism rate in the system. 78% Morrison was officially lost. You can't use confidential data. I can and I will, Richard replied. Especially when I plan to sue the department for systematic negligence. The city attorneys I brought in today will need to explain to the mayor why the department will be making national headlines for the next 6 months. Alexander crouched down in front of the boys. Marcus, Miguel, do you want to stay here with me? Forever? Forever? Miguel asked. Alexander smiled. You are my family. Morrison made one last desperate attempt. You don't understand the necessary protocols. There are psychological evaluations, home visits, adjustment periods, Ms. Morrison. Alexander stood up, his voice calm, I see, in 48 hours. I have managed to prove family ties, provide a safe home, comprehensive medical care, and emotional stability for 2 children that your system abandoned. In 5 years, you have managed to separate them 3 times and systematically traumatize them. Richard handed over another document, temporary custody order signed by Judge Hamilton an hour ago. Permanent custody will be decided in 30 days. But considering the evidence of departmental negligence, the outcome is predictable. The city's lawyers whispered among themselves, clearly calculating the potential damages of a lawsuit against a billionaire with irrefutable evidence of systemic failures. Mr. Rothschild, one of them approached. Perhaps we can settle this amicably. Alexander laughed humorlessly. You tried to separate two orphan children who only had each other. Children who are my family. There is nothing amicable about this situation. Morrison, realizing she had completely lost, tried to save face, sir. I was just following standard protocols. Protocols, Alexander repeated slowly, that turn children into file numbers. Protocols that separate families for bureaucratic convenience. Protocols that failed so spectacularly that two 8-year-old boys preferred to live under a bridge rather than trust you. He walked to the window, looking out at the city below. You know what's funny? I spent 30 years looking for my lost brother. You had these children for 6 months and didn't even bother to check if they had family. Richard closed his briefcase with a decisive snap. As of today, Marcus and Miguel Santos Rothschild are under the permanent legal guardianship of Alexander Rothschild. Any attempt at interference will be considered harassment and will result in immediate legal action. Morrison knew she had lost completely. Her bureaucratic arrogance had met an adversary she should never have underestimated. A billionaire who had lost his own family to the very same system and would not allow history to repeat itself. Ms. Morrison, Alexander said softly as she headed for the door. Next time you decide you can tear a family apart, maybe you should check who you're up against first. She paused at the door, turning one last time. This isn't about winning or losing, Mr. Rothschild. You're right, Alexander replied, hugging Marcus and Miguel. It's about two children who have finally found their place in the world, and about a system that has just learned that some families are worth fighting for. As the government van disappeared down the street, Marcus looked at Alexander. Are we really safe now? More than safe, Alexander smiled. You're home. But this victory over arrogant bureaucracy was only the beginning. What Morrison didn't know was that her attempt to separate that family had awakened something much bigger. A man with unlimited resources and a mission to completely reform a system that fails the most vulnerable children. And when someone with $2.4 billion and 30 years of pain decides to change the world, even the most rigid systems discover that some wars simply cannot be won against those who have so much to lose and even more to gain. 6 months later, Alexander watched Marcus and Miguel playing in the garden of their new home. Not the cold penthouse, but a cozy residence where laughter echoed through the hallways. The family that fate had separated for 30 years was finally complete. Mrs. Morrison had been fired after an internal investigation. Richard's lawsuit resulted in a complete overhaul of adoption protocols, preventing future unnecessary separations of siblings. Uncle Alex, Miguel ran up to him. The teacher said our essay about family was the best in the class. Alexander smiled, remembering the note he still kept in his wallet. We found this on the floor. 2 honest children had returned more than money. They had returned the faith that there is genuine goodness in the world. Marcus approached. Do you think our father would be proud? I'm sure Alexander hugged his nephews. You brought me back the family I thought I had lost forever. That lost wallet had not been a coincidence. It had been the universe correcting a decades-old injustice, proving that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as impossible coincidences. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel.